Welcome back to another episode of the We Don't Know What to Watch podcast, the podcast about two guys who watch movies based on a magic algorithm. I'm Noah Saturn, and with me today is the Toshiro Mifune to my Akira Kurosawa, Kyle Mulford.
Thank you. I'll be here all day.
Yes. So, Kyle, what movie do we have here today?
We've got La Commare Secca. This is another movie that I'm going to completely butcher the names of.
And we apologize for our poor Italian.
It's the English title is The Grim Reaper. It's directed by Bernardo Bertolucci,
Who is probably most famous for his stuff in like The Conformist and Last Tango in Paris, neither of which I haven't seen, but there was a really cool movie poster in the office of like the head of the film department in college for The Conformist. So, there's that, and then there's that one scene in Last Tango in Paris that everyone knows about.
I do know about that. I've not seen that either. I didn't actually realize, I didn't do my research very well because I didn't realize that was him. But this is his directorial debut, 1962. And I went to Wikipedia because, that's where all of the hard facts are. And it said that La Commare Secca translates actually to the skinny gossip. And I'm not sure what that means. The Grim Reaper actually makes sense because of a thing in the movie. However, when I went to, just because I was curious, I went to Google and put in the Google Translator. And it came up with, if I put in La Commare Secca, I am really butchering that, I'm sure. It came out as The Dry Commando. And I'm not sure that has anything to do with this movie.
I don't know, but Dry Commando does sound like a knockoff of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Commando.
It's an Italian, it was one of those Italian knockoffs.
Except this time he's in the desert for some reason.
It's very dry there. Very, very dry. So what is this movie about? What's your snowball pitch?
To put it simply, somebody's been murdered, and the police have to talk to different witnesses, and all the witnesses were together, or at least they think they were together, in some park late at night.
Well, there you go. Dead girl by the river. Yeah. So this starts off with the dead girl by the river. It's you're panning down the little gully there.
Yeah, you pass the van with Chris Farley living in it.
There's a fat man in a van.
Yes.
And
then we see there's a dead girl by the river too.
Just surrounded by garbage. There's melancholy music.
Lots of garbage.
And then they zoom in on her hand. And I don't think I really got why. Unless I missed something.
To prove that she has hands?
Yes. Exactly. Well, after we find the dead girl, then I was confused about this movie right off because I wasn't exactly sure where they were going with it. So when the first segment appeared, which this movie is segmented, I didn't realize it was going to be segmented. Mm-hmm. So we cut to someone being interrogated. I'm going, oh, is this the killer? No, the first guy was Conti. Conti?
Yes.
Played by Francesco Ruggiu. I'm sure
Your Italian is impeccable as always, Kyle.
I should be in the movies and playing Italian parts. So the police is interrogating him and what he did the day before. And so then it turns out that this is kind of the basis of what's going on with the movie is everyone who's a witness in the park is going to be interrogated. So he's the first one.
And this is the guy we're like, I was just looking for a job. It's hard to find a job in this economy. Am I right?
Yeah, he was meeting two priests for a letter of recommendation.
And then it's actually his two buddies.
Yeah,
and they're just going around and goofing off all day.
Well, but then the job they found was, going and stealing purses from people in the woods.
Yep.
People making out in the woods. So they were distracted. So they would sneak in and steal the purse.
I mean, I've never been to Italy, but maybe that is exactly what people do when they go to the park.
Isn't that what you do here in the park is just go make out?
I don't know what you do in the park.
I don't do anything in the park. Shh. They steal one pursed, and they find a couple pears in there, which,
food.
That's what you carry in your purse. And then all of a sudden we get this giant clash of thunder, and he screams and runs off to a cave, and we cut to an apartment.
And then there's a girl doing stuff.
She's just waking up in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know who this girl is. Well, I think we're supposed to realize it was
I think it was implied to be the victim eventually, but
because they did show like the face, and I just didn't put it together at first.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm a little slow on the uptake.
Maybe.
That could be. So this is kind of a theme with the interrogations. They have an interrogation scene where you don't ever see the cop in this interrogation scene.
It's just kind of a voice, and the person is facing the camera,
and then they'll start telling their story, and it goes
transitions
into
to what they were doing that day, and then sort of this framing device. There must have been some sort of rainstorm, because it always rainstorm in the middle of the afternoon or evening, perhaps. And then because everyone experiences it in some way, and this is all taking place in sort of the Rome metropolitan area. That's
your signifier of when the girl actually got up to go out, because every time we see one of these cutscenes, she's doing a little more. It's right at the beginning of the rainstorm.
Yep,
she's waking up.
Giant crash of thunder. It cuts to girl doing more stuff each part of the day.
Yeah, combing her hair, getting dressed, all this stuff. And then after you see just a little snippet, then it goes back to the person that was being interrogated and where they went from the rainstorm and beyond, and how they got to the park. So these three guys, they show them going and trying to steal from someone again, and they try and steal a radio. And I thought this scene was actually kind of funny because, I have written here that the guy that they're stealing from actually sees them, and he gets up and bitch slaps him and says he'll turn him in.
Hey, I'll turn you in. We're trying to steal my radio.
And so he says, "Oh, I didn't see you. I just thought it was a radio laying out in the woods."
Yeah, because that's what you do with a radio that's currently playing.
I'm just an orphan boy.
I'm just an orphan. Over me.
And the best line was when the girlfriend of the guy says, "Kill this thief, Jehovah." Jehovah? He interrupted our lovemaking. And the guy says, well, just get out of here, kid.
Yeah, I don't want to kill you, I guess, because even though
I'll go to jail, and I'll be the one interrogated.
And then they'll have to do this whole thing again just for this.
And then I'll never get any more lovemaking in the woods with my girlfriend.
What if there's, like, ticks and stuff?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So he goes, Canty goes back. Can we just call them someone else? Because I cannot do Italian.
I'm just going to call him Pear Guy.
Pear Guy goes back to his other friends, and then it cuts to him walking home, and he walks through the park. So that's the extent of it.
And that's kind of it. But this is about a 90-minute movie. But these sequences just seem kind of long and ponderous. And that's just not just for this one, because this guy is kind of moping around doing nothing. It seems like everyone in this town on this day just doesn't do anything and just kind of wanders around aimlessly.
Well, and then they go too much into it, because this is all about the dead girl in the park, and they're interrogating people to find out who the murderer is.
Mm-hmm.
And when you cut to these guys, it could have just simply been them stealing a purse, and then, the thunderstorm happens, and then show them huddled in a cave, and then he goes and then walks through the park. Why did we need the second robbery, unless it was just to fill this out to a feature-length film?
Maybe.
Because I didn't really see the purpose in that other scene, although it was funny with the two guys who actually caught him. So that's all we see of him, is just walking through the woods, walking through the park, and then we cut to the next interrogation. And this one is Bustelli. That one's a little easier to say. Played by Alfredo Leggi.
I'm pretty sure it's Alfredo Fettuccine.
Alfredo Leggi. He is a former thief, and he goes to meet his girlfriend. And this movie confused me a lot.
Oh, yeah?
Because I was not sure what was going on with all of this. He's going to meet his girlfriend, and then she's like, "Have you broken up with your other girlfriend or whatever?" And so he's like, "No, I'm going to do that this afternoon." So he goes to her house, and it turns out like he's some sort of... is he like a pimp or something?
I was thinking, yeah, he's a pimp.
And his other girlfriend is one of his...
also
girls
works for him, I guess.
Yeah, so she goes,
sex workers,
and she's behind on collecting payments.
So then they go collect payments from other people.
Yeah, and so she goes out, and it seemed weird because it almost was like she was the pimp and he was the one who's supposed to be collecting money. It was really confused.
Yeah, maybe she just brought him along for muscle. I don't know.
Because it almost seemed like he was just like mooching off of her, and she's like, "Oh, he's a good-looking guy. I'll just pay him to be around." Yeah,
I guess.
But I think there was supposed
Does that
to
mean
be
he's the sex worker?
I couldn't tell. I know that there's prostitution in there, but I couldn't tell if it was him or if it was her.
Yeah.
So they're going and finding finding people to get their money from, and one of the first ones that they run into is someone who doesn't have any money. She's like, "Take the radio, take whatever you want." So they take the dog.
Not the dog.
The dog? Why are you taking my dog? And they're like, "You can have him back when you pay us your money."
So I guess now there's a dog being held for ransom.
And then we get the rain comes.
Yep.
And we cut to the apartment.
And now the dead girl is out of bed.
Brushing her teeth or combing her hair or
something.
And then we cut back to Bastelli, and he's breaking up with that girl in the rain. And she's all mad at him and says, "I don't need you anyway."
Mm-hmm.
And
especially in a southern accent like you just unintentionally did there.
She's from the southern part of the boot of Italy.
Maybe.
And the other girl's waiting for him, and he never shows up for her. And I thought this was kind of cool because he gets into his car, and this is like, 1962. So he's got a record player in his car. It's almost like a CD drive, but he puts a record player in there. I mean, a record in there instead.
I guarantee you some hipster has that exact same car and a record player to go in their car too.
If I were a rich hipster, I would totally get that car with a record player in it.
Oh, yeah.
Play my 45s in the car.
Yep. But it's like a 45 of like some dubstep or something. Just to make it seem even weirder.
And when he plays his music, he's standing outside his car like you do, like just park it and play some music in your car and stand out in the street. And then he sees his ex, his very current ex, come towards him again, and she runs after him and attacks him with a knife. And so he kicks her in the gut and runs away. And he just gets like a nick on his cheek. But you see that, and then he goes to the park and we see him lurking behind a bush, and he sees his ex get into a car with someone else, and he seems like angry or jealous about it. But again, that was another scene that was like nothing came of that.
Yeah,
because it didn't matter. So because that was just him being in the park because he's spying on his ex after she attacked him with a knife. So some of these scenes just like don't make sense with the rest of the story.
Well, some of these scenes just don't make sense.
Except when we get to the next interrogation.
Oh, this guy.
Constantino.
This guy.
Played by Alan Midget. He said he'd gone to a movie, but in actuality, what was he doing?
Oh, this guy I nicknamed, at least in my notes, I called him Private Pervert.
Private Pervert is a great name.
Because he's a soldier who's like off duty or something or on leave for the day. And instead of hanging out with his other soldiers, he just wanders around the city creeping on random girls.
And I don't think that these were actors. I think that, like, he was creeping on real people that...
They just had a camera going?
And they just had a camera going. Because they seemed genuinely like, what the hell are you doing? So I have written in my notes here, the word creepy, I don't even know how many times. There's a montage of him being super creepy.
Yep.
And then he goes to this statue, and he starts... It's almost like a V statue, but it looks like legs like spread open, and he rubs it creepily.
Yeah, I forgot about that. And then he's like takes a tour. He hangs around in the like a tourist group of people going to see like the Colosseum.
And was that money that fell from the sky?
Maybe.
Because all of a sudden there's a bunch of bills falling down. I didn't know if it was like dollar bills that he was going to take to the strip club later because he's creepy.
I assume it's like, what is all like $2 bills or something? Stuff you never find.
While he's there with that tour creep, just creepy. While he's there with the tour, did you notice that there was also a young boy there, and he was staring at him really creepy? That's where I wrote, this guy creeps me out.
I was thinking that maybe the young boy was trying to use maybe he was like a scanner. He's trying to make his head explode.
Well, it wasn't the boy who was staring creepily. It was the man. It was Private
Pervert?
Private Pervert.
Yeah, maybe Private Pervert is also a scanner.
He could be. Is that what he's doing? Trying to blow up these girls? He wasn't trying to get with them?
Maybe. I mean, that made for a much more interesting story.
Well, then, of course, we have to go and see him. He walks into an alleyway and pulls a sandwich out of his pants and sits down to have a little lunch.
His sandwich, and then there's more stuff happens, and then eventually it starts raining, right?
It does. But I also have that he started creeping on some nuns, too.
Oh, yeah. The nuns.
He walks past a church or a monastery or something or whatever, and there's a bunch of nuns outside, and he starts going up and hitting on them.
I just kind of wish it was the nun from the movie None of That.
I don't know that movie.
It was a movie that was kind of shot on video. So, but it's kind of this dumb movie, but it pretty much takes like the style of like a 70s, think like Death Wish type of movie, except it's a nun and she's fighting gangsters and stuff.
That sounds fantastic.
And there's even a scene where she goes to heaven and then there's like an auto-tune singing Jesus. This is a real movie and I saw it in a theater.
How did you manage that?
Late Shift at the Grindhouse at their local independent theater. We've talked about this before, but Late Shift at the Grindhouse we've got a local independent theater near us. And what they do is on every Wednesday night around 10:30 is that also the microphone isn't plugged in. But we'll just keep going. It looks like it. So anyway, what I was saying is that every Wednesday night around 10 p.m., what they would do is you could come in, you'd pay like a $2 ticket. They'd also have like cheap beer. And you can come watch sort of the weirdest, crappiest movies you've ever heard of. And the one they were playing in particular was None of That. You see a lot of weird stuff there, but it's also some of the most fun you're going to have because that audience is also there for the right reasons of the weird stuff. So it's just downright bizarre sometimes, but you have a few laughs and you have some cheap beer.
Yeah, it's fun. I've been there quite a few times. I just missed the None of That screening. So anyway, back to the creeping on nuns. I think that's about the time it starts raining. So, back to the girl in the apartment. And then back to him because she just does whatever. And we come back to Constantino. And he's running for shelter from the rain. And he goes under like a train track or something. And I think he's just got like this creepy stare because he even like stares up creepily at the train.
Yeah. Hello, train. Will you be my new girlfriend?
And that's where I wrote down, what is wrong with this dude? He sees he's under the tracks and there's a bunch of people there. And then he just starts laughing creepily. Like this really weird, eerie laugh. And when the rain is gone, he wanders aimlessly through the park. And
then also because he's been wandering all day, he gets kind of tired.
Yeah. So he tells the cops that he fell asleep on the bench, which actually he wasn't lying to the cops with that one. But and then I mentioned creep so much because it was funny because he said when he woke up he saw a blonde man wearing clogs with a package under his coat, and he didn't like the way he looked. Gave me the creeps, he said.
As the pot is calling the kettle black.
And then after we talk about the clog man, we interrogate the clog man, played by Renato Troiani. I'm not sure if these people ever did anything else because this is early 60s Italian cinema, and I am not big on my Italian cinema.
I'm also not well versed in Italian cinema. I mean, I've seen I was going to say 8.5, but then, a lot of people have seen 8.5. It's one of the more famous ones.
And to be honest, I actually took an Italian neorealism class, and
no,
I did not like it, and I don't remember it. I've seen a lot of movies.
Maybe you've seen this movie before.
I think this was a little outside of the time period of neorealism. That was more like post-war, going into
the 40s, 50s,
early to mid 50s, because that was more about the Italian neorealism.
Depressing.
Yeah, it was depressing, like how Italy was coping with the war. That their cinema was not as prevalent anymore, so they were showing kind of just what it was like to be there and showing real people, not actors, unless they had a big name actor playing the main role. But most other people in it were actually just ordinary people trying to get by, and most of those movies were about trying to get by at that time.
Okay, so I can think of things like Bicycle Thieves is probably...
Bicycle Thieves is a thief. Is probably the most well-known Italian realist film.
That, or the one with Sophia Loren where she won an Oscar, Three Women or something, or The Women or whatever.
That could be. I'm not as familiar with that one.
It was very much in that style. Anyway.
Anyway, back to Clogman. I don't remember his name. I just have Clogman here. So
Carl Clogman.
Carl Clogman. He says that the package under his coat was a cat for his girlfriend.
It's a kitty?
It was a kitty. It was a kitty.
Didn't sound like a kitty.
He said he got off work and wandered around and he saw a kid walking through the park, and he saw a guy behind a bush. That was Bastelli.
And then he saw...
They saw the soldier boy sleeping.
Soldier boy again. Oh, anyway.
And then he saw two kids who frequent his club. I don't know if it was his club or a club that
he happens to go to.
He goes to, too. And he said, oh, those two boys, they met with a mysterious man in a coat and walked away together.
If you know what I mean.
Oh, man.
I really don't. What do you mean, sir?
I don't know. But he did see the woman.
That's true. He did see the victim.
And that's the point where I put, man, this guy saw everything. Because everyone else said, I didn't see nothing. I fell asleep. This guy's like, oh, I saw this guy.
Star witness, yeah.
He knows everything.
Mm-hmm.
He got all defensive with the interrogator, so I wonder what that could mean. He's the only one getting a little defensive. He said, the three guys did it.
Yeah.
And I know where they live because
I'm Batman.
Because they go to the club that he goes to or he owns or whatever.
I guess, maybe it's one of those situations where, like, to start a tab, you have to give them your ID or whatever.
Maybe. Maybe that's what it is. Well, since he knows one of them, that's a good transition to the interrogation of one of those three boys.
Yeah.
Pepito. Pepito says he was in the park trying to scrape up money for a meal because he wants to mac on a couple of girls that he sees every day.
And he's like, ladies, I'm going to cook you a great meal because they always share their food with him.
Yeah. Although his opening line was even better than that.
Oh, yeah?
I had to write it down because it was... His pickup line was, don't you know, she who eats alone chokes on her food.
I mean...
How do you not win a girl with that?
I guess that's one of the better ones I've heard, I suppose.
That must have worked because she gave him some bread and jam.
Yep.
And then they just wandered around. Like, there was him and his friends were there, and then they... wandered around off, separated into couples, and they're talking about getting married and how the girls would cook for them because this is the 60s, so and they're in Italy,
yeah.
So and then there's a random shot of a bird cage in a park, and then thunder rumbles back to the girl in the apartment, and she does her thing.
Yeah,
we're at that point. She just didn't.
In case you didn't realize, this film is kind of repetitive.
Very repetitive. Although, I mean, each character is like, it's almost like a completely different movie, but the sequences are repetitive still.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. It's different and yet repetitive.
And there's just a lot of people wandering. It's like, it seems like the majority of this film is just random people doing random things.
Yeah. Because then we go back to these guys, and it's two couples. So there was the two guy friends and then the two girls. And they're running and they go to see some lady named Mariella and listen to records, and then the girls ask them to dance.
I assume they're like smoking weed while listening to Dark Side of the Moon while watching
Wizard of Oz.
Yes. Six up, man.
That sounds like a day for me. Mariella says she'll cook the next day if the boys bring the ingredients. Henchmen.
I wish there were henchmen in all colorful costumes.
That would be fantastic. This is all black and white, no color. This is so boring. Oh, black and white Italian film. What is this? She says that she'll cook for them the next day if they bring the ingredients. So that's why they're like, they need 2,000 lire for food. And so that's why they went to the park and they pass by the sleeping soldier, and then that's when they meet the mysterious third guy who asks for a comb and offers them a cigarette. And he's another creepy dude.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's like legitimately creepy because he wants to go with them, and they realize that he's like a pervert. Like, he's a legit pervert. And
not as worse than private pervert?
Far worse than private pervert.
So call him Sergeant Pervert?
Sergeant. He's Captain Sergeant Pervert. He's what private pervert aspires to be. And the boys know that this is that that's what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like, well, we could grab his lighter if we go with him, and then we could steal that and sell it for the money or whatever. So they stole his coat and ran off, and then it cuts to them running from the cops, and one of them jumps into the little basin or river or whatever to swim away, and I'm pretty sure he drowned.
Yeah, he either drowned or got pulled under by the current or something.
Yeah, so that's why there was only one of them being interrogated.
Yep.
So actually, there was 2 deaths in this
outside of this park. Like flies, man.
Don't go to this park. That's the moral of the story.
Curse.
Well, in case you couldn't figure out the mystery, it goes back to Clog Dude.
Carl Clogman,
who's still being interrogated.
Let's assume he's just like a regular clog salesman, so he always has to wear his product or something, because that's the only... He clogs just like this.
Well, he says he couldn't remember what the girl looked like, but then we cut to him in the park, and we find out she's a prostitute.
Yes.
Who was just looking for a John in the park. And he talks to her, and here's what I thought was funny, because unless I read the subtitles wrong or something, the boys were looking for 2,000 lire for some for some potatoes and nochi. Is that how you pronounce that? Nochi and potatoes. They need 2,000 lire. Well, he's going up to this prostitute, and she says she only costs 1,000 lire. So she costs less than some meat and potatoes. So that, I mean...
I don't know. Nachi is pretty good, though. Nochi, I forget it.
I'm sure...
It's actually this kind of pasta-like stuff made from mostly potato.
Yeah, because I think they needed the potatoes and the sauce.
To make the nochi.
To make it. So, anyway, she only costs 1,000 lire, so she's a pretty cheap prostitute. So he goes down under the bridge, and he tries to steal her purse. This town is full of thieves and murderers.
I guess. What is this? This is not the best for the Italy's at Chamber of Commerce or the Tourism Board.
They're like, whatever town this is, they're like, don't watch
Rome. This is all in Rome.
Don't go there. It's full of murderers and thieves. She tries to run, and he beats the crap out of her and walks away with the purse. And the Sergeant Pervert actually saw this, and that doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, man, because she was just a prostitute, man.
Well, it doesn't matter that he saw it, because that doesn't pertain to anything, because it just cuts to the club.
Oh, yeah.
And the cops have it figured out, and this must be after the interrogations or whatever.
I guess, yeah, it's like a weird epilogue.
Yeah, so the cop runs in and arrests Clogman, and he just screams out, "She was a whore! What did I do wrong?" So he basically said, "I did it."
Okay.
So I mean that was the movie. Whoa, that was the movie. But then the Grim Reaper comes in. They just have like this statue or a plaque in the
courthouse or something.
Yeah, and there's a quote on this plaque on the building that says, "And the Grim Reaper of Julia Street raises her scythe once again." And then the end. So I'd like. Apparently, you don't want to go to that street.
I guess so. I mean, because it's got a Grim Reaper on it.
Apparently the Grim Reaper comes up. Maybe in the 50s or something, this was like a street that was notorious for people getting killed, so they made a movie? I don't know, because this was actually a story before.
Yeah, the story for this film was come up by another guy, was Pasolini, who was another Italian director, also known for doing weird stuff around the same time period.
And he was actually he wrote a screenplay off of this. He was actually going to direct this.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bertolucci took over. I'm not sure why that all happened.
Yeah.
But this is very, very reminiscent of like the Rashomon style of storytelling.
Yeah, that's kind of what we've been dancing around this whole time. But
yeah, Bertolucci I read that Bertolucci denied at the time having seen Rashomon before making this film.
Rashomon came out in 1950, and this was, you said, 62?
Yes. But I can actually believe that because it was Pasolini who wrote the story. So
yeah, I mean, it's probably more Pasolini would see it, I guess.
And maybe he saw the movie, because it doesn't, Bertolucci, if he came in later, maybe he had never seen Rashomon. He wouldn't have had to have seen it in order to finish this film. So I'm going to have to say that Rashomon's probably better. I haven't seen Rashomon. I've seen a couple other Kurosawa, and they're great. So,
yeah, I mean, you watch Rashomon. It's definitely, it's a milestone just in cinema, but also in world cinema, but just in cinema in general, and for good reason. I mean, it still holds up, even though the movie came out like 60 some odd years ago. So I would definitely recommend Rashomon, not just as a whole, because Kurosawa, dude, was a masterclass in making any sort of films.
Well, and he influenced a lot of stuff. Like Rashomon, you see a lot of stories that are in that style of the different viewpoint,
All
telling
the
same
events.
story.
Like he pretty much, that's like episode upon episode of Criminal Minds or whatever CBS procedural you want to talk about.
Yeah.
And then there was even a Batman the Animated Series episode that used a Rashomon story.
So yeah,
it was pretty good.
It's a very popular thing to take from.
And of course, Kurosawa, we could talk about him all day, who did stuff like Seven Samurai, which was then the Magnificent Seven, and of course he did Yojimbo, which was then the Fistful of Dollars trilogy, and of course Hidden Fortress, which was Star Wars. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. So he influenced most of what you've seen, so I would highly recommend going him. However, I mean, what do we say about who should watch this movie and why?
I think this movie is an interesting idea. It's more of an interesting case study if you like watching a famous director's kind of first debut film, because it's it can be satisfying to see watch different films from different points in someone's career to say okay, this is what they were like in this career, then this is what they learned, or perhaps they didn't learn from this film, to see if how a creative person kind of changes and grows along their way. And I feel like Italian movies, it's not the best, but it's by no means, it's not bad compared to other things that I have seen.
And for a debut, there's a lot of stuff that you can see where he may, where he would have built up his career, because he uses a lot of interesting camera angles and storytelling devices and stuff like that. It's just that the movie itself, I actually blame more on the story, because it's focused around this murder and then taking these random people who are in the park. And I like the idea, it's Rashomon, it's all these other things that we've seen. However, the fact that the people don't tie together in any way other than they were in the park, so it all seemed disjointed. Like, I'm seeing this story, I'm seeing this story, I'm seeing this. It was almost like what do you want to say? I can't come up with the word. A lot of horror movies. Anthology.
Yeah, almost an anthology, but then at least, I don't know. This is definitely one of the more interesting things I've seen. I think some of it might become to the editing. Maybe it could have used a tighter edit, at least what I would prefer, but I mean, maybe it was all done on purpose.
Yeah.
Italian movies have their own different, distinct storytelling style than, Western or any other culture, because, people are different, have different influences.
And I'm wondering if the Italian neorealism had some sort of influence on it too, just because a lot of the stuff seemed like I said, when Private Pervert was out wandering around, it seemed like they weren't using extras or anything. It seemed like real people out and about.
Uh-huh.
And so in scenes like that, so there might be a little carryover from 10 years ago with the neorealism. So it's an interesting period for Italian cinema, because this is actually about the time that spaghetti westerns started coming into prominence there.
Yeah, it was right around this time, 62, 63 was when A Fistful of Dollars first came out with Clint Eastwood and by Italian director Sergio Leone. And those are their own kind of fascinating, weird subgenre / style.
And those are the most popular spaghetti westerns. If you get a chance to watch some other spaghetti westerns, there's some weird stuff out there that's kind of fun.
Like with any other genre, but if you're Sergio Leone was just one of the best
he was
westerns directors out there.
If you want just good movies, go for the Dollars trilogy.
Oh yeah.
So there were other people that liked this movie. Rotten Tomatoes, the critics give it 86% because it's Italian debut by a big director. I don't know. Sometimes,
yeah.
I think,
everything is so subjective. So again, Rotten Tomatoes is just it's a resource, but there is no definitive good or bad really about any movie.
Yeah, and this is on. We watched this on Filmstruck, Because this is actually a Criterion release movie also. It was released in 2005 on a Criterion DVD. It was released I think it was released in the USA in 1982, so 20 years after it was made, it got released here. And then it had a limited restored run in Italy in 2006. So it must have some prominence over there to get a restoration.
I think some of that might be just like, oh, it's this famous director that we like.
And it was his debut. And
yeah.
A lot of people do that with debuts.
As opposed to something like 1900, which is this 5-hour movie he made, which is just so boring. But I watched all of it because I didn't have a lot to do that day.
So, anyway, that is the Grim Reaper.
Yep, and next time we have, let's see here.
Ooh. Let's pull up the wheel.
Spin to win.
Spin it.
And we've got something called Ancient Alien Origins on Amazon Prime.
Researchers discovered that aliens from another world assisted in the evolution of man and were the genesis of a very real bloodline that remains intact today. The aliens left Earth millennia ago, but the signs are growing daily that the prophecy of the return is imminent. This is a documentary from 2016, it says. And there's a quote on here from O.H. Krill, or O. Krill. It says, startling insight into our forbidden past.
Ooh.
So, until next time.
Yeah, until next time, I'm Noah Saturn.
And I'm Kyle Mulford.